stop.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much for joining. Apologies, we are running a few minutes behind. A few technical difficulties on my side, but we've made it in. We'll just leave it a few minutes to let a few more people join us, and then we will kick off the conversation this afternoon. All right, I can see we've got a few people still flowing in, but given we started a few minutes late, we might just jump into it. I did just want to thank everyone so much for joining us this afternoon. This is our second Candid Conversations webinar in recent months. We're finding these sort of short webinars that just run over a lunch break seem to be a bit of a hit with our audience, so we wanted to keep them going. And today we're really lucky to be joined by Mark Morton again, who hosted our previous Candid Conversations. And we're also joined by a customer of ours, Hannah Russell from Manila, but you will hear more from both of them in a minute. My name is Amber Woods and I'm the marketing manager here at AgriWebb, been on the team for about 5 years now. And yes, really thrilled that you've all made the time to give up your lunch break and listen to us have a chat this afternoon. So goal of today is really I'll be handing over to Mark and Hannah soon, and we're just hoping to have a chat about, given the market at the moment, what are a few things that Hannah and her family are prioritizing in their business that she really feels are making a difference and allowing their business just to really be elevated. So before I hand over to Mark and Hannah to have their discussion, I did just want to introduce Mark. So Mark's formal qualifications include a Bachelor of Ag Economics, a Fellow of the Australian Rural Leadership Program, and graduate of the Australian Institute of Company Directors. Mark, of course, is a very dear friend of AgriWebb, being one of our many sets of eyes and ears, helping AgriWebb understand the complexities of the Australian livestock industry. So thank you so much for joining us for another webinar, Mark.
Thank you, Amber. Lovely to be here again, and it's a great series that we've kicked off. The idea around the Candid Conversations is to understand and share producer experiences, what works, what doesn't, what some of the challenges, and ultimately how to create a successful business adopting some of the technology that AgriWebb offers and others. So our guest this afternoon is Hannah Russell. Hannah is a significant livestock producer from Manila, southern New England, New South Wales. 4,500 cows. And interesting, it's a crossbreeding operation. We've heard lots around the Angus, an Angus breed or a Wagyu, but it's interesting to have a crossbreeding operation, a family operation, which is the heart of Australian agriculture. Good afternoon, Hannah. Many thanks for your time today.
No, thanks for having me.
Hannah, in our discussions, our briefing discussions, you had, it was quite fascinating, but you've had an interesting introduction into our traditional livestock industry. Care to share a couple of insights?
Yeah, so my family, our original big jump in was carrot farming, but majoritively we were in the poultry industry. For meat chickens, my family was involved in that for roughly 100 years. So 50, sorry, 50.
50?
Sorry, 50? Got to find that little poster. It's 50 years.
So it's 50 years in the meat industry.
Yeah.
What's interesting, Hannah, is to take some of those thoughts and processes that you had being a meat chicken producer and then kickstart away into a significant beef operation and a cropping operation as well. What were some of your expectations of what we were looking for when you came across to the light side?
So we made the major jump into predominantly beef cattle and cropping 6.5 years ago. We always ran cows, but it was a smaller production. So coming from that intensive poultry farming industry, it was a lot of work. There was a lot of details behind the scenes that you had to record, and jumping into the cattle, there just wasn't as much requirement. So we were sort of in that bit of a lost situation where we had a lot of people that were prepared to do a lot of information, and there wasn't a need for it, or there wasn't a requirement from governing bodies to report as much. And we were just preemptively ready that that was probably going to happen soon, and like it will soon happen. It started happening, but we're expecting that it will get bigger and more intense. So we just wanted to capture somewhere where all of that was, that wasn't a piece of paper, because a lot of people involved in our space, moving from poultry, there was a lot, and then coming across to the livestock, there was a few less people, but it was still a lot of people involved.
So it's quite. So what I've heard you pick up there, Hannah, is that you've come across from an intensive industry. Feed conversion would have been critical.
Yeah,
Accountability for what you produce direct to a marketplace. And
yeah,
then to throw that dynamic further, you had both family and staff to come with you to take on this beef breeding operation, and then looking to actually translate that experience from the intensity into the livestock industry. And then you said, okay, now where is it? Am I right?
yeah. So big push was dad going, we're all used to reporting all of this information on our chickens. So why shouldn't we be reporting that on our cattle? And more intensively on that individual basis, you sort of report it as a mob or a paddock worth of livestock that they've eaten feed, and that's sort of the main requirement. So yeah, moving across, dad's like, well, let's actually work out what that conversion is. Let's work out what's that costing us to do that. Are we in the right group of cows? Are we in the right paddock? Are we growing the right crops? So we've got to report that, or like to ourselves, but also to a governing body eventually.
And so, Hannah, that would have said in a business, as a family. So Dad's saying, these are the questions we need to ask. Hannah, over to you. Am I right? Yeah. Dad's
Yeah,
saying, your baby, Hannah, tell us how we're going to do this.
yeah, pretty well. I got the short end of the stick, but it's probably turned out to be not so short. I love it, and due to different health issues on my end, I haven't been able to be as active as my siblings. So being able to actually sit down at a computer and report it, and to go to the yards and go, use are watching the cows in the paddock, but I actually can see on my computer, on my phone right now, that that animal is not doing well because it's not actually gaining weight. It may look all right, but it hasn't gained weight for the past couple of months.
So if I put another context into it, 4,500 cows being, for roughly anywhere between $8 to $10 million worth of livestock, that's that capital that's sitting in that part of that business. It sets up a few more questions that hang on, how do I take this on? So if I was asked you a question, Hannah, and said, what you're doing, what you're doing now, and what you're discovering, we're using AgriWebb. What wakes you up at 3 o'clock in the morning? Having discovered what you do, what's that anxiety tick?
Or more so, what doesn't let me go to sleep is probably my thing. I stay up clicking on the phone. Probably just incomplete bits of information. I like all my mob to have full weights. Like if a mob comes through, it needs to have everything in line. A little bit of OCD like that. But then, yeah, pulling it back out and making sure that I did get the right information in there is probably my biggest thing, keeping me awake.
That desire for completeness
Yeah.
and you touched on weights and other. What are some of the performance criteria that you're watching? What is it that you look for, and what questions are you asking out of that data?
Yeah. So we have a bit of a split. So we have our straight Santa cows with Santa bulls over them, either AI or natural servings. And then we also run few mobs of what we call our commercial mob, which are Santa cows. Occasionally we'll have a Santa bull, but majority Charolais bulls go over them. So it differs between. But our elite breeders, which are the straight Santas, straight bulls, they are sort of ideal quality out of them is to actually get them classified through the Santa Gertrudis Society. So just nice fertile cows, which if you know anything about Santa Gertrudis cows, they're not overly fertile. So yeah, keeping that going. So calves every year in our elite program, but going across to our commercial program, it's sort of just as long as they're spitting out a calf and up until they're 10, 11 years old, that we're happy to keep them going. So yeah, making sure the weights are converting into that, making sure they're having calves and making sure they're just like a nice sound cow. I love the temperament scoring in AgriWebb. Love to give a cow a nasty score because she looked at me wrong or anything. So yeah.
So that intelligence process, there's a lot of data going on, and then you find the space to actually. If I said to you, and if I was in your father's position, tell me what I need to see.
Yeah.
Would that be so? So that idea, how do we make decisions? What sort of decisions are you looking to drive off? And if we can expand the conversation, not just AgriWebb as a technology piece, but the other technology platforms you might be using as well.
Yeah. So when I bring a mob of cows in, so our commercial mob is majority to breed any calf, any weaner that's going to come out. It's going to be a fat, fast growing cow. So I'm using a few different technologies with that to just make sure they're fat and they're growing. We use Tapari to bring our our weights across, and they spit out their own lot of information as well. That goes into AgriWebb. But yeah, just make sure they're those fat ones going.
Hannah, I was doing my research and I came across an article that you were quoted in the EID Integrity Systems.
Yeah.
And I couldn't help it, but there was a throwaway, and I don't think it was throwaway, but the role that the digital technology plays in succession. That dreaded word that's running around the Australian agricultural industry from north, south, east and west. But as a point I latched on, and your family have built what you've built, there must be some ingredient in there, but I'm curious to think, what's the linkage between the digital environment and that, I won't use the success, that strategy piece.
Yeah.
I won't use the dreaded, yeah.
My family's big on staying together and making sure everybody has a spot. And it sounds sort of cliche, but we do all have a space in the farm, and the farm will expand to make sure there is room, or we'll find another element to make room for each other. And so technology has sort of helped expand that. It's really taken a lot of my role. So without taking away from younger siblings, older siblings, it's provided me a space to grow and learn. And then my eldest brother's been on the farm for quite a few years now. So he knows a lot of the basics, and then knows that it would be easier if he had some technologies. So some of the younger siblings are coming through and going, well, use this and it will make that easier. And we're all just expanding through that. So keeping that technology rolling through provides a new element. And also like spacing off that digital technology, we're using AI programs. So using basically all your AI. We've brought our younger siblings through to be able to preg test and do your AI programs. So they've gone off and learnt how to do that to bring a new element in.
So as a business, you might describe your role as a chief technology officer. Is that being a bit forward?
No, it's not been forward at all, because they lots of people would define me as a dog with a bone when it comes to making sure it's correct and making sure it's in AgriWebb or in the right digital space or sent to the right email. We're also working through emissions and a few things like that. So there's a bit of just making sure all that data's there is definitely my chief cap on my head.
You touched a good point, Hannah, and I'm interested in whether that role crosses to some of the cropping, and but in a cropping sense, that technology is actually embedded in that investment weight, tractors, spray rigs, etc.
Yeah.
It's not the case in livestock, is it?
No, no. There's not so much. It's a lot of based out of your cattle yards. Is like your biggest spot. There's not too much out in the paddocks. You've got your Optiways coming through, which is great. But other than that, yeah, it's not so, I guess, readily available.
So one of the challenges we've come across, and I'm interested in your take on this one, is that it's a significant farming business. You've got staff, you've got brothers, you've got siblings, sisters, etc. And then encouraging those within that business unit to adopt the technology and then culturally make it happen. Interested in your insights on guiding a 50-year-old station hand with that I won't be too mean. I'm past 50 myself, so I'm not going to be that rude. But how to get those people within your business that are not the technologies, they're not comfortable with it. How do you cope with that one?
I think like anything, it is a battle. But we've just strongly put our foot down and gone, this is where our business direction is going. This is where we see profitability. So if you can keep your, dare I say, you can keep your notebook and put whatever information you need in there, but as long as at the end of the day it has gone into AgriWebb in some form of the sense, then we're happy. If you're not so technologically sound, I'm happy to come and give you a hand. Like we'll sit down. We've introduced into our startup meetings, which are a weekly meeting, we've actually introduced ticking off your tasks and making it a bit of a game. And probably sounds a bit nasty in a way, but if you haven't done your job, then we're all going to be like, why have you not done your job? And sort of pick on that. So just built up that bit of morale of it's cool to get your jobs done and put them in to a digital sense and have that record. So
you were a little more candid with me last night in our discussion where you more or less said if it's not in AgriWebb, it didn't happen.
Yes. Yeah, that's our famous motto for the farm. One of the AgriWebb people said it to me basically. If you're this deep into it and going to make your business run with this, then if it's not in AgriWebb, it doesn't exist. So put it in AgriWebb.
There are hosts today, and we'll quietly leave it to a point. But the point is, you've actually set the culture of the business. Is that challenge me on that one?
Yeah.
Am I right? This is the culture. You've set that expectation in staff, but this is how this is the unwritten ground rule. This is what you do.
Yeah. We have been quite lucky in that perspective of where we came from, the chicken industry. There was big people, like you could lose your accreditation, which you can in cattle, but it was a lot more. It was every 2 months. You were going through and reporting on this information. So there was big stipulations around it. If you did not put that information in and have the correct stuff, big issues.
That's what I'm actually taking out of this. Is really fascinating. We quite often we learn from other industries. Our thoughts come from outside of our own paddock, for want of a better word.
Yeah.
And I recall a conversation I had with Phil Chan one day, and I said, mate, you've come from an IBM background, a technology background, nothing to do with an ag. I said, what are you seeing in ag that prompted the investments you've made? And I'd be curious to relate that same point back to you and your family, Hannah. That what were the opportunities that you saw coming from a chicken background into this livestock business?
Yeah. I guess when the decision was made to leave chickens, the next decision was cattle and cropping and keeping that going. And if you want to keep going, you've got to stick with what you're doing and sort of work within the boundaries that you're given. And I like to push the boundaries a little bit. You get a little bit of a kick out of pushing those boundaries and making sure industries are growing with you and making sure they are developing. So that's probably my biggest push on that.
That boundaries is an interesting point. And again, we link your word boundaries. I would use risk.
Yeah.
But the point, and it's probably a leading question, and your thoughts on this, but the fact that you've come from an intensive industry, there was accountability, there were consequences for not meeting those expectations. To translate that into a beef business and build that same discipline, and for want of a better word, call it product quality, I can't think of a better word, but that market acceptance for what you've got. Was that a fair statement? And then using this data to the data you've got to accelerate what you're doing?
Yeah.
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 So you touched on this a little bit before, and we've talked the individual animal management processes within AgriWebb, the mob base, the tasking, grass budgeting, but it hasn't all. There's been moments along the way that you've discovered things that were missing or could be enhanced. Can you give me a little bit of an insight on some of those points that when you peel the onion back, there's another layer. Can you tell me a little bit more about what some of those layers might have looked like?
Lots of things. No, I guess we just have to go back to our family's focus, and that's having fertile cows that are growing fast calves or more fertile calves. So we just, the whole business had to just adapt where it was going. So picking up, the AgriWebb, and I guess myself diving head first into helping with the individual management and the EID programs and EMVD programs through the LPA.
Yeah.
They're basic problems of just not knowing where your cows are going without that personality involved. And then we chose to work with Tapari, and their connection wasn't with AgriWebb very well. Like, it was there, but the programs, the level of intensity that we were on, they weren't as compatible.
Yeah. Couple of conversations ensued.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure there's a few people that probably have my phone number blocked.
Yeah.
Or caller ID is pretty high on their level. Yeah, I don't know. There sort of seems to be. I'm sure there was issues, but they're not really springing to mind now. So they must be fixed.
Yeah, and I guess what we're talking through, Hannah, is that we're looking for a perfect solution. The reality is we don't. But your business has a very clear direction about where it wants to go, how you want to get there, the systems to support it, and then that problem solving, problem resolutions, establishing workarounds. Yeah, I don't like the term workarounds either. But the reality is as technology evolves and we're discovering what those blockages are, well, then we've got to work out how we're going to resolve them. And it's a continual moving feast, and it's exploring, reset, exploring, reset, but I'm hearing there's an investment in people in your business. There's a clear direction. There's a focus on what success looks like. And, I've got to be cheeky about asking about succession, but I feel that what I'm hearing today is that the most important part of succession is contained in the first 7 letters. And that's where you and your family are pointing that this is the road of travel we're going on, and this is what success looks like, and this is how we're going to get there. I've got that completely wrong, haven't I?
No.
Good, Andrew. Hannah,
No, we do strive for just making a profitable business to keep all of us going, because there is a few of us in there, and there's getting a bit of age and growing families within themselves. My old brother has kids, so just making sure that there is going to be something for them later on is a high priority, and making sure we're not killing 4,500 head of cows.
That's a really good way to do it. Focus on the life part of livestock.
Yeah.
And I've got one final question for you, and then we might open up the audience for questions. And I think that the power of these conversations comes from the questions in our audience. I'll hold it there. But Mark Ferguson, in his Head Shepherd podcast, has a really good question, which I'll pinch from him. In your career, can you tell me who's had the one individual that's had that significant influence, and why?
Yeah. So when you posed this to me earlier, I was very stuck on a few people, but I think probably my most impactful or inspiring person would probably be my grandmother. So she worked alongside my grandfather from day dot, getting the chicken industry going and doing the jobs that not every farmer likes to do, making sure the digital side is done or the information is in the right spot. So just following on from her, really, she helped raise me. So learning what she did, and that you just get in and do it. No matter the job, just go and do it. So yeah.
At that point, Hannah, I'm going to ask you if I think it's a good moment, Amber, if we might take questions from our participants today.
Yeah, perfect. Thank you so much for that, Mark and Hannah. If you do have questions, please feel free to shoot them through now. But while we are waiting, I did have one question for you, Hannah, and it was just around, you spoke a little bit about goal setting, and I wondered whether you had business goals that you were comfortable sharing, and you can keep them as high level as you like, but just for the remainder of 2025, what does success look like for Grassbrook Pastoral?
Yeah. So the big push right now, my young sister and I are booking a trip to go to Brisbane. We're going to catch up with the Santa Gertrudis Society and a few things like that. So we've been doing a lot of DNA testing. So our big push for the end of the year is to make sure all of our elite cattle have got a sire registered to them, or at least they have the right sire registered to them. So going into 2026, or even towards the end of this year, making sure we have that option on what cows can breed to what bull, and getting our right amount of crosses through, so that we potentially, if we choose to go through to a stud, as well as keeping our commercial, will be acceptable for that. And conquering a new set of rules for me to learn.
Exactly. That sounds awesome. Thank you for sharing that, Hannah. I might quickly share my screen. Mark, did you have any final questions for Hannah?
I think Hannah's run me down. I'm good.
You're questioned out. Okay, well, thank you both. No questions coming through the chat. I will follow up this session this afternoon with a recording to the session, and Mark's details as well. If you wanted to reach out to him, he's always up for a chat. Thank you so much for joining us, Hannah. Before we close out this afternoon, I did just want to call a few things out. So really exciting at the moment, and until Monday, we have our end of financial year sale running. And I wanted to shout out that this isn't just for non-customers. If you're an existing customer and you're on our essentials or compliance plan and you are looking to upgrade in the next couple of months or even 12 months, now is the perfect time, because you can get 40% off your first year and 20% off your second year. So if you are looking to improve, productivity, efficiency, and hopefully profitability of your business, this is a great time to invest in some ag tech. And then the other thing I wanted to call out was just that we have recently launched our 2025 State of the Farmer report. So we drop this report every year. It's a really interesting piece of content that we put out. It's our biggest content project for the year. We surveyed over 1,000 people this year and had over 900 producer responses to make up this report. And some of the insights are really, really interesting and really align very neatly to a lot of the conversations we had today. We had, 54% of people saying that increasing productivity this year is their top priority. 64% of people are currently using ag tech to measure their grazing strategies. And 38% said that increasing operational efficiency in 2025 is a top priority. So, Han, you definitely touched on all three of those points. So that lined up very nicely, and I had to throw those in. I'll make sure I include a link to that report in the follow-up email as well this afternoon. Han, I know you've got to get down to the cattle yards, I believe.
Yes, got some more calves to pot through.
Perfect. Well, thank you so much for joining us. Thank you for pausing your calf marking for AgriWebb. And thank you, everyone, for joining us. And we hope to see you on the next webinar.
Thanks.
Thanks, Hannah.
Bye.